Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. It is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. The 12th day of the Diddy trial was anticipated to be mundane, filled with routine filings and procedural matters. But the atmosphere shifted dramatically when Eddie Murphy quietly entered the federal courtroom through a side entrance. Reporters snapped to attention, jurors leaned forward, and Diddy's expression hardened. No one, neither the press nor most of the legal teams, had been informed that Murphy would testify. His words, delivered under oath, reverberated far beyond the courthouse walls. "I've stayed silent for years," Murphy began, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of long-held secrets. "After what I witnessed, I stepped back from Hollywood. That burden has stayed with me ever since." Seated in the witness stand, Murphy's tailored suit was impeccable, his demeanor composed. Yet his eyes betrayed a deeper, older story, one that seemed to carry the scars of Hollywood's underbelly. When prompted by the judge to state his name for the record, he complied simply, then glanced at Diddy, who sat motionless at the defense table. Adjusting the microphone, Murphy delivered a bombshell. "I walked away from Hollywood because I saw things I couldn't unsee." His voice remained even, but the courtroom hung on every word. Murphy recounted an incident from 2006 when his career was experiencing a resurgence. Fresh off a string of successful projects, he was fielding offers and accolades, his phone ringing constantly with opportunities. "I was being courted like I was young again," he said. Amid this whirlwind, a discreet invitation arrived from a prominent producer, beckoning him to a private gathering at a secluded Hollywood Hills estate. Described as an exclusive event where careers were shaped and connections forged, it piqued Murphy's curiosity, though he approached it with caution. He'd heard whispers of such events, Diddy's notorious networking nights where phones were confiscated, cameras prohibited, and guests were urged to immerse themselves in the moment. "I thought it'd be typical Hollywood," Murphy said. "Music, drinks, people mingling." But upon arrival, he sensed something was amiss. The estate was fortress-like, its iron gate opening only after a biometric scan. Valets in identical dark suits greeted him, taking his phone and handing him a card inscribed with a cryptic phrase. "Tonight, show your true self." Inside, the vibe was unsettling. Not vibrant, but subdued, almost oppressive. No music blared, no laughter echoed, only hushed murmurs filled the air. "It felt like a church," Murphy testified, but not the sacred kind, something darker. Surveying the main room, he recognized familiar faces, actors he'd collaborated with, others rarely seen at such events, alongside athletes and industry moguls. Their behavior struck him as odd. Not celebratory, but guarded, as if every move was scrutinized. Then a woman in stilettos and a man in a robe glided past, heading silently down a side corridor. "That's when it clicked," Murphy told the court. "This wasn't a party, it was about control." When the prosecutor asked why he lingered despite his unease, Murphy's response was raw. "I had to know. I had to see it for myself, and God help me, I did." Eddie Murphy continued his testimony, recounting how, after wandering the eerie Hollywood Hills estate, he was approached by Diddy himself. "He came up to me like we were lifelong pals," Murphy said, his tone measured but heavy. "Slung his arm around me and said, 'Brother, welcome home.'" A faint smile crossed Murphy's face as he recalled the moment, but it quickly faded. He wasn't talking about Hollywood, he meant this, whatever was happening in that house. Murphy described Diddy as composed, almost regal but with a chilling edge in his gaze. As they walked through the sprawling mansion, Diddy seemed to revel not in the opulent decor but in the undercurrent of control permeating the rooms. Pointing out guests, he'd murmur remarks like, "That one just sealed a $200 million deal," or, "He's mine now." The most unsettling moment came when Diddy paused before a heavy wooden door, turned to Murphy and said, "This is where you decide, stay a comedian scraping by or step up to the next level." Murphy tried to brush it off, assuming it was some Hollywood mind game, but Diddy's unblinking stare demanded a response. Then Murphy noticed something chilling. Through a slight gap in the door, a camera tripod stood in plain sight. "I saw people enter that room nervous," he testified. "When they came out, some were beaming like they'd hit the jackpot. Others looked empty, like they'd lost something." Unsettled, Murphy excused himself, claiming he needed a drink. Diddy flashed a smile and said, "Take your time. We're all family here," before vanishing down a corridor. That moment, Murphy said, was a turning point. It wasn't a party anymore. It felt like a test, an initiation. Stepping outside to clear his mind, Murphy was stopped by a woman at the exit. "You're not leaving yet, are you?" she asked, offering him a drink. "No one goes before the experience." That phrase, the experience, lodged in his mind like a warning. Returning to the main lounge, Murphy witnessed something that cemented his unease. He described being led, along with a small group of high-profile figures, into a dimly lit back room. The air was thick, the music absent, replaced by the glow of candles and heavy velvet curtains. A long table stood at the center, adorned only with silver trays. Among the group was a rising action star, whom Murphy, under pressure from the prosecutor, identified as Dwayne Johnson. The courtroom fell silent. Diddy stood at the head of the table, his smile theatrical, like a host commanding a stage. "Tonight's about how far you're willing to go," he declared. "Greatness has a price. If you want to rule Hollywood, prove it." A polished tray was set before Johnson, its lid removed by a gloved attendant to reveal raw, steaming monkey brains. Some in the room let out nervous chuckles. Others averted their eyes. Diddy, unfazed, urged, "Come on, Rock. Eat, and the roll's yours." Murphy's voice wavered as he recounted what followed. Johnson hesitated, glancing around, then complied, swallowing as Diddy applauded like a proud mentor. "That's what I'm talking about," Diddy exclaimed, scanning the group. "Who's next?" Murphy froze, his stomach churning. "I felt ill," he said. "I looked for an exit, but then Diddy walked over to me." Standing inches away, Diddy locked eyes with him and said, "You ready, preacher boy?" Murphy shot back, "I didn't sign up for this." Diddy leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "Then what are you doing here?" The courtroom sat in stunned silence as Murphy described his exit. Not a frantic escape, but a deliberate departure. "I wasn't afraid for myself," he said. "I was afraid of what they could do to others." As he left, Diddy called after him, "You'll come back when you're ready to play for real." Murphy never did, and his career in Hollywood, he testified, was never the same. Eddie Murphy straightened in the witness chair, his voice deliberate as he continued. "I told Diddy I was a man of faith," he said, "and I meant it. I told him I wouldn't take part in their experience, wouldn't eat anything, wouldn't sign anything, and I sure as hell wouldn't trade my soul to fit into their world." He paused, his gaze settling on the jury. That's when Diddy made it clear. If you don't play their game, the game plays you. Murphy recounted how his refusal to participate marked him, not with overt threats, but with something more insidious. Symbolic exclusion. "The way he laughed at me," Murphy said, shaking his head. "He turned to the room and said, 'Look at this preacher boy,' thinking his faith's gonna land him a blockbuster." The room broke into laughter, strained, uneasy, but loud enough to sting. "I wasn't humiliated," Murphy clarified. "I was repulsed. That night wasn't about loyalty. It was about desperation. Who'd bend, who'd break?" After leaving the Hollywood Hills estate, Murphy sensed a shift. "I didn't just walk out of a party," he testified. "I walked away from Hollywood's hidden world, the one behind closed doors, where silence is bought with favors and shame is the currency." In the months that followed, his career began to unravel. Projects once confirmed were abruptly stalled. Roles tailored for him went to others. His agent of 7 years stopped returning calls. One producer, who had once championed him, reportedly told a colleague, "He's not one of us anymore." "Aligned with what?" Murphy asked, his voice steady but laced with quiet grief. "Aligned with Diddy? With their candlelit rituals and silver trays?" He spoke not with anger, but with a controlled intensity. "They didn't fire me. They didn't cancel me. They just stopped calling. That's the real blacklist. Silence, not a bullet." Murphy described his efforts to keep his career alive. He wrote scripts, pitched ideas, took on voiceover roles, but an invisible wall blocked his path. People would smile in meetings, say all the right things, but nothing moved forward, he said. It was like I was just outside the inner circle, close enough to see the gates, but never let in. His testimony culminated in a line that landed heavily in the courtroom. You don't have to sell your soul in Hollywood, but if you don't, they'll make sure everyone thinks you never had one. When the prosecutor asked if he believed he was blacklisted, Murphy didn't waver. Yes, he said firmly. Not in a loud, headline-making way, in the quietest, most surgical way possible. That's how the system works, through whispers, not warnings. He explained the mechanics of exclusion. No formal memo, no explicit ban. Instead, there were private dinners, hushed phone calls, and meetings behind closed doors where his name was labeled a risk. Murphy recalled a conversation relayed by a friend. A high-ranking executive had said Eddie didn't pass the test. When pressed for clarity, the executive replied he said no when he was supposed to say yes. That single refusal, Murphy testified, was enough. The doors don't slam shut, he said. They just stop opening. Over the following years, his professional circle shrank. Producers who once called him a guaranteed box office draw began keeping their distance. Studios that had courted him with lucrative offers cited budget issues or creative differences. I watched my career fade in slow motion, Murphy said. I'd send pitches and hear nothing back. I'd sit in meetings where executives nodded politely, then ghosted me afterward. Eddie Murphy's voice grew heavy as he continued, describing the self-doubt that crept in after his career stalled. You start wondering if it's just bad timing or a shifting market, he said. But then you catch the whispers, the things said in rooms you're no longer invited to. The prosecution introduced evidence, emails from a studio executive with Murphy's name marked alongside the phrase, "Not aligned, pass." The judge admitted the exhibit into evidence. Murphy leaned toward the microphone, his tone resolute. Hollywood's blacklist doesn't announce itself, he said. It smiles, shakes your hand, and erases you while you're still in the room. He testified that his refusal to partake in the disturbing rituals at Diddy's Hollywood Hills gathering and his choice to walk away branded him as uncooperative in the eyes of the industry's power structure. They labeled me, Murphy said, not for hurting anyone, but for refusing to be hurt. His words struck a deeper chord as he continued. Others lost their careers for the same reason. They saw what I saw, said no, and were written off as if it's all just chance. It's not. Murphy's testimony took a solemn turn as he described Hollywood's true currency. This town doesn't just produce films, it crafts myths, he said. The biggest myth is that talent drives success. It doesn't. It's about obedience. Then came the most explosive part of his testimony, sparking gasps in the gallery and prompting an immediate sidebar request from the defense. There's a list, Murphy revealed. It's unwritten, but everyone in the industry knows it exists. It's the names you don't challenge, the ones you don't question, because if you do, you're finished. The courtroom grew tense as the judge cautioned him against speculation. Murphy nodded. I'm not guessing, Your Honor, I lived it. He pressed on, claiming that Diddy was among those on this invisible list, alongside figures like Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey, who, he alleged, helped shape it. Jurors shifted uncomfortably. Reporters typed furiously. Murphy clarified that the list wasn't a physical document, but a silent boundary, enforced with ruthless precision. Speak out against someone on that list and your name gets whispered in the wrong rooms. Not for wrongdoing, but for daring to speak, he said. That's how Diddy stayed untouchable for so long. It wasn't just his wealth or his lawyers. It was fear, the fear of what it cost to say his name in the wrong light. Murphy testified that even those who never attended Diddy's parties protected him, their careers built on his influence. Tyler Perry knew, he said. Others did too. They didn't have to join the darkness, they just had to turn a blind eye. When asked if he'd ever discussed the list with others, Murphy nodded. A fellow actor, once a close friend, had warned him, "You're crossing a line, people don't come back from that." Murphy didn't name the actor but noted, "We haven't spoken since." That's the cost of truth. You lose your circle. The judge allowed Murphy to submit evidence, a collection of emails, text messages, and call logs showing a clear shift in tone from industry contacts after the infamous party. "They don't tell you they're cutting you off," Murphy explained. "They just stop responding. Your name goes from essential to not now." Then came his most damning statement. "You think Diddy blacklisted people alone? He had help. He had protection. He had an entire network." Looking directly at the jury, Murphy said, "This isn't just about what happened in that house. It's about how many kept it quiet, how many wrote checks to bury it, how many built empires while the rest of us faded away." Eddie Murphy's voice softened as he delved into more personal territory, the courtroom hanging on his every word. The prosecution asked how the events at Diddy's gathering had impacted him on a human level. Murphy paused, his gaze fixed ahead, then spoke. "It wore me down," he said. "Not in one blow, but gradually, piece by piece. A career doesn't just vanish, it erodes. The harder I tried to act like I was fine, the more it consumed me." He admitted to bottling up the experience, sharing it with no one, not even his closest confidants. "Who would believe me?" he asked. "And if they did, they'd be next in line to pay the price." Murphy described periods of isolation that followed, days when he couldn't bring himself to leave the house. "I'd sit in one spot replaying that night, not because of what happened to me, but because of what I saw others endure. The fear in their eyes, the forced smiles, the people who felt they had no way out." During this time, Murphy leaned heavily on his family. "My kids were my anchor," he said. "Hearing their laughter from another room, it pulled me back, reminded me what was real, what was worth holding on to." Faith became another refuge, not a public performance, but a private lifeline. "I stopped asking God why this happened," he said. "I started asking when would I find the courage to speak? When would the world care enough to listen? When would truth outweigh wealth?" The courtroom was silent, absorbed by his words. Murphy revealed he sought therapy and spiritual guidance to grapple with the guilt of walking away while others remained trapped in the mansion's shadow. "I kept asking myself if I should have done more, if I could have pulled someone out with me," he said, his eyes briefly meeting Diddy's. "But I know now that the most dangerous choice would have been to stay quiet, and I stayed quiet far too long." When the prosecution asked why he never wrote a tell-all book or gave an expose interview, Murphy's smile carried a bitter edge. "The people who control the platforms are the same ones guarding the secrets," he said. He closed the segment with a raw reflection. "I lost the limelight, but I found my peace. That was the first honest role I ever played, a man finally free from the illusion." The prosecutor approached cautiously. "Mr. Murphy, why now? Why speak today after all these years?" The question lingered like a heavy mist. Murphy exhaled, his voice steady but resolute. "Because the walls are finally crumbling," he said. "For the first time, they're coming down." Eddie Murphy's voice carried a quiet resolve as he continued. "I'm not the only one speaking out now," he said. "The world is finally listening." He described a turning point, watching Cassie Ventura take the stand, her voice trembling as she recounted her ordeal. Then came Monique, armed with evidence, transcripts, documents, and years of suppressed pain delivered in a steady, unyielding tone. When a long-buried recording of Prince surfaced, warning of truths ignored in his lifetime, Murphy knew he could no longer stay silent. "I couldn't sit this out," he said. "Not again. Not while the wounds are still fresh." For years, fear had restrained him, not just of losing roles, but of retaliation, of his truth being twisted. "I saw what happened to those who spoke up," he testified. "They weren't just sidelined, they were erased." But the trial had shattered the silence. "There's a chain reaction happening," Murphy told the jury. "I'd rather fall for the truth than stand by and guard a lie." He described watching Diddy's outbursts in court, seeing the defense falter and feeling public sentiment shift, not because of sensational headlines, but because of the raw honesty delivered under oath. "I don't need a book deal or a comeback," he said. "I need peace, and peace only comes when the truth drowns out the lies." His children, now older, had recently asked why he stepped away from acting. "I couldn't tell them I was just tired," he admitted. "That wasn't true. I stopped because I refused to lose who I was to keep a career." Looking at the jury, he clarified his purpose. "I'm not here to destroy Diddy. I'm here to make sure no one else has to be built up by him." The judge called a brief recess, and as Murphy stood, dozens in the courtroom rose, not out of formality, but out of reverence. When proceedings resumed, the atmosphere was denser, charged with anticipation. Murphy's time on the stand was nearing its end, but his final words would leave an indelible mark. The prosecutor posed one last question. "Mr. Murphy, what's the most critical lesson the jury and the public should take from your testimony today?" Murphy paused, then leaned into the microphone, the room so still it seemed to hold its breath. "Hollywood doesn't thrive on talent. It thrives on submission," he said. "It rewards compliance, not character. The moment you stop playing along, stop pretending, you're left on the outside." He elaborated. What happened at Diddy's gatherings wasn't an outlier. It was part of a machine, carefully designed, deliberately hidden, fueled by fear, favors, and enforced silence. I saw good people become pawns. I saw grown men degrade themselves for a shot at a role. And the ones laughing the loudest, they were the ones holding the reins. Turning toward the defense table, he continued, "This man didn't build an empire, he built a snare. Too many of us walked in thinking we were climbing to the top." Addressing the jury, Murphy said, "I could have spoken sooner. I should have, but I'm speaking now because what's been hidden is finally being exposed, and you're the first to see it clearly." His final words became the day's defining moment, reverberating beyond the courtroom. Don't shield the polished lie. Let the truth be raw. As he stepped down, the judge thanked him. The courtroom remained silent, Diddy visibly shaken, offering no response. Eddie Murphy, once comedy's brightest star, had delivered the most sobering testimony of his life, potentially altering the course of the trial and the industry itself.